ETs. So why do we work with permission slips for contact experiences? Are permission slips just speeding up the process for our agreements?
Yes, you still have free will in terms of how you experience the agreements. The fact that agreements have been made doesn't necessarily always mean that every single specific detail has been laid out. You are still allowed to determine for yourself through your free will exactly how you might want to go about experiencing that idea if such an agreement exists. So you can even change your mind and not experience the idea of the contact. The idea, again, is that your free will is respected in that context. So the agreements are fulfilled by various means. And yes, permission slips can, based on your belief systems, accelerate some of those things. Permission slips can, by various agreements, even slow down some of those things. So it's about how you want to go about fulfilling the agreement if you still wish to. The idea of your agreement to have contact with extraterrestrials is not quite the same as the idea of the agreements to experience certain things in your physical reality in terms of your lifetime, the things that are representative of your themes and your challenges. Experience and interactions with extraterrestrials can be folded in to the idea of some of the themes of your exploration, but by definition, we are a little bit outside your venue, outside the idea of your timeline, until such time as enough of you make an agreement that encounters with ETs actually are part of your overall agreement, your overall timeline. That's kind of what permission slips are all about, is getting you to a point, if you're so willing, where the idea of encounters with beings in other realities can actually be seen as part of your natural timeline, part of your natural agreement. So that's part of the process, and why sometimes permission slips can assist you in getting used to that idea and bringing our timelines and your timelines together in a single mutual shared timeline experience.
Okay, and this person is asking about the soul and the soul tribe. She says, I understand that we are eternal beings. Is our family, parents, kids, pets, etc., always going to be with us? Are we all part of a soul family and go through these experiences together?
Yes. Now, again, you can spin off and go have an adventure by yourself if you really wish to. That doesn't necessarily include the idea of other members of your soul family. But the idea is that you're still always connected and you'll always come back and recognize the family. So in a sense, yes, you're always connected. It doesn't mean you can't have your own independent adventures.
And this person is asking, what is the source of sadness and can it be avoided? Should we be striving for happiness or will it simply come to us if we follow the formula?
Sadness is the result of a belief and a definition of disconnection from source. Disconnection is the idea. If you understand you cannot be disconnected, you cannot feel sadness. So in the idea of creating certain limitations for yourself, for your consciousness to experience, including the experience of disconnection, even though you can never actually be disconnected from source, you can experience the idea of that disconnection as a kind of loss, and that can promote the experience of sadness. But yes, if you understand how the formula works and you apply it precisely, then you also have the understanding, based on knowing how things work, that you can never be disconnected. And thus there is no reason to experience sadness in that way. So by really precisely following the formula, it is highly unlikely for you to choose to experience sadness.
Okay, and this person is asking, basically, her daughter took her life 16 months ago. Was
Yes.
this in her contract? Was it meant to be? Is she okay? This person feels stuck and broken. How can she reconcile this nightmare? Please help me, I'm drowning.
All right. Well, take a deep breath. It's all right. Your daughter is fine. Once in spirit, remember, you see yourself for what you really are, who you've always been. So the idea is that she may have gone through her life review and realized that no, it's not necessarily a part of the contract to commit suicide in the way that most people on your planet commit suicide. The timing of your death is the timing of your death naturally. And committing suicide, in a sense, is a little bit like breaking the agreement. But the idea is that the soul learns from that experience and realizes that may not have been the ideal choice, realizes they may simply have not ever had the information required for them to make a different choice. But they're perfectly fine, absolutely eternal and indestructible, going through the life review to realize they could have done things in a different way, experiencing the effect that their suicide and the choices that they made to commit suicide have had on other people, including you, and therefore sending you love and letting you know that they may, in a sense, be sorry that they did that, for it was not their intention to make you experience the idea of grief over their commission of suicide. And now they know, in a sense, better from a different perspective, that that may not necessarily have been the ideal choice for them to make. But they send you love, unconditional love. They want you to know they are fine. You will meet them again. Again, everyone meets everyone. And again, they are learning a lesson that will allow them to make more positive choices in the future. So they're perfectly fine. Take a deep breath and allow yourself to let go of the grief, because the grief can get in the way of receiving communications and messages from your daughter to let you know she is perfectly fine.
Okay. And this question is, how is there such a thing as non-existence? Does anything not exist, or does everything exist? Is there nothing that doesn't exist? Does everything I can think of, every wild and ridiculous scenario, exist simultaneously in a parallel universe?
Yes, non-existence does not exist by definition. That's its quality, to not exist. That which exists cannot become non-existent because non-existence doesn't exist. So there's nowhere for that which exists to go. The idea of every wild idea you have being a reality somewhere, yes, that's true, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a reality that is similar to your reality. Even the very idea that someone may have a wild idea and render it as a piece of artwork means it exists in some way, shape, or form, even if it exists in another form other than an actual expression of a living being. It still exists. So the idea is it exists in whatever is relevant for it to exist according to its own logic, its own context. But anything you can imagine in some way, shape, or form exists. It doesn't mean it's real in the same context that you consider yourself to be real, but it's real in the sense that it does exist in some form that's relevant for its context, for its reality. So even if it's something exists as an idea, even if something exists as a cartoon, it still exists in its own context. It doesn't mean it's flesh and blood like you are. But you cannot imagine non-existence. So everything you imagine does somehow, in some way, in some form, exists. And again, nothing that exists can become non-existent because non-existence by definition doesn't exist. That's its quality, to not exist.
This person had this dream, and in the dream, they were with some grays, and they were laughing and chatting about how scared the human race is of them. I remember telling them that they are great beings and there's nothing to be afraid of. Was this an actual interaction with them in the astral realm?
Yes.
Okay.
There is no more to be said. Yes, is the answer.
Okay. This question is, during a deep meditation moment where I was in an endless library of information, I encountered another human that is well known, and we acknowledged each other's presence. Is it possible to encounter another human that may be aligning with the same frequency as you in a given moment?
Yes, of course. That's what it's all about. It's all about resonance. It's all about frequency. Someone who has an interest in similar things to you can wind up in a similar frequency, and you can cross paths with them, especially in the idea of other realms and other dimensions that are relevant for both of you to be experiencing simultaneously. So yes, of course it can happen that way.
Answer didn't quite satisfy my question. I just don't understand why anything exists at all.
We understand that it can be a challenge for three-dimensional beings and four-dimensional beings to wrap their mind around the concept of timelessness, but there is no asking why. Existence just exists. That's its nature. That's its quality. It can't do anything else but exist. So to ask why it exists is irrelevant. Why questions can only exist within existence. They can't be answered about existence. Existence exists. That's its quality. That's its nature. Even when you say it's always existed or it always will exist, you're speaking linearly within existence. You're adding a time factor within existence. Existence is not subject to time. So there is no why. That's just what it is. It just is. It is pure isness as opposed to non-isness. So there is isness. And that's the only answer that can be given. Good day, good day.
Hello, Bashar.
Good day.
Good day. A few months ago, my wife and I had the privilege and the pleasure of attending one of the Bashar events hosted by you and your group. It was in Sedona, Arizona. While I was there, I had a very profound experience.
All right, do share.
I would like to go into it if it's okay.
Yes, keep it as brief as you can.
I will. There were two guided meditations that you performed. The first one, I didn't get a lot out of it. My head was shaking all over the place. But the second one, I calmed down, and almost halfway through it, I felt this blanket of energy envelop me. And as I put my hands around it, I felt a stream of electricity, best way I could describe it, going through the base of my neck, through my throat chakra. For the next 15 minutes or so, my muscles tensed up and my head shook strongly, is the best way I could say it. So I shook all the way through with this beautiful energy through the end of your session. And after you were done, and as I walked out into the lobby, I continued to shake, again with beautiful energy. When I went to the restroom, I shook. When I went outside to hike up Bell Mountain, I shook. When I went to bed, I shook. And when I got on the airplane, I shook. And my wife said, "Mike, please stop doing it. People are looking at you." I have never experienced anything like this in my life. What happened?
It is not uncommon for those who allow themselves to open up to the higher frequency of their own higher mind or the higher frequency of other beings you may be in connection with in a channeling state to experience bodily symptoms of the nature you have described. This is something that happened to a degree with the channel himself when we first made contact with him energetically. And the idea is that there are different kinds of symptoms that may be representative of you getting used to passing higher frequency energy through your body to acclimate your nervous system to those higher frequencies. So again, this is something that can happen until you get used to that energy, until you're willing to clear yourself out of any belief systems that might form any kind of a blockage or an obstacle to those higher frequencies, until you can smooth it out in that way and allow your nervous system to be more superconductive to those higher frequencies. So what you are experiencing can be, I'm not saying it has to be, but it can be the beginning of a channeling in connecting to another being or another entity. It can be simply you making a stronger connection to your own higher mind and bringing that through in whatever creative and imaginative way you wish and applying it in your life. But this, again, is a common way that many of your human bodies react to higher frequency energy connections when you finally open up to them, until your nervous system gets used to handling the extra energy. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you. While I was in Sedona, someone asked, how much of our history do we know? And you gave an interesting answer of 48%.
Yes.
Certainly that made me curious as to what's missing. And I feel compelled to learn about the Moorish culture and possibly some giant trees that could have been here and intentionally cut down. Am I on the right path?
Yes and no. It depends on what you're referring to as giant trees. For you have large trees on your planet now. There have been some trees that have been minimally larger, but not as large as some people think. Some people have claimed that certain formations on your planet are the stumps of giant trees. They are not. They are the formations that are left over from volcanic activity, from geological formations, and therefore they have been misunderstood and mislabeled by some people. Just because they resemble the idea of tree trunks doesn't mean they are. But there have been many other civilizations, some of which you are faintly aware of, such as Atlantis and Lemuria. But there have been other civilizations on your planet that you know nothing of. Some even existed before humanity took over. So there's a lot of history, in a sense, that is missing from your knowledge base, and it is one of the things that extraterrestrials will provide for you when open contact occurs, is a more complete understanding of the history that will be relevant for the reality that you will be in when open contact happens. Does this answer your question?
Yes, thank you. You speak of the Anunnaki and the Nephilim in many of your transmissions.
Yes.
Are they the same?
The Nephilim are an offshoot to some degree. The Anunnaki that we refer to are usually referring to the group that interjected their genetic material into an early hominid and created Homo sapiens. The Nephilim are those that ultimately recalled the first group of Anunnaki when they had violated their laws by creating Homo sapiens, and worked as the guides once Homo sapiens had existed and been created to lead Homo sapiens in a certain direction that would allow them to become self-reliant. So to some degree they are connected, but you're talking about different groups with different intentions.
Okay. A lot of times people ask you questions, and many times you say, I can't answer that, or I won't answer that.
Yes.
Are there groups of humans that you have to work with that sort of set the rules as to how you can interact with us? Or is it just through your collective consciousness in your entities?
It is through ours and your collective consciousness that prohibits us from knowing what would interfere with your evolutionary path in a way that would remove the ability for you to discover the things that you need to discover in a process that will allow you to grow in an appropriate way.
Mm-hmm.
So we inhibit ourselves from knowing information that would intervene or interfere with that process of your own evolutionary development.
So it is the consciousness, but not individual humans, that set the rules.
The only thing that, shall we say, reflects to us is the idea that we must respect what you have decided as a collective society are the rules of your society that we are not allowed to violate. So in other words, we cannot encourage you to do things that are against your laws, so to speak. Those are set up by individuals on your planet. The rules that you have agreed to about forming your ideas of governments and so on and so forth must be respected by us to a certain level, to a certain degree, because you have set that up as the way you wish to run your planet. Now, if you change those rules, then we can abide by the new rules. But that's in your hands.
Final question. I've always struggled to understand why us humans like to go to war with each other. But you say we're energy. One of the things that come out of war is pain and suffering, misery.
Yes. Yes.
Is it possible that there is another group of entities that use us as a food source that feed off of this?
In a sense, there can be, but it is not, again, as much as you may think. It is not that which is promoted by a lot of your conspiracy theories. There do exist such entities who can, in some sense, receive the idea of energy of pain, energy of suffering, as a kind of support, as a kind of sustenance, but it is not as strong nor prevalent as you may think, and it is not something that is predominant in your reality.